It's a tale as old as time. On one side, there's heroes solely dedicated to saving the day while following their hearts to do what's right. On the other side, there's a stuffy, bureaucratic government organization who cares more about keeping things by the book and probably mandates wearing a tie to work. These two sides clash constantly, and it's the same with the TVA and the rest of the heroes in the Marvel Universe. But you want to know which heroes the TVA hates the most? Well, that's what we're here today to talk about. But yes, of course, Deadpool is on this list. Let's get started. I mean, as Loki would say,
what did you expect?
If we're going by the Disney Plus show starring everyone's favorite trickster god, then yeah, the TVA definitely hates Loki. It sounds like the Time Variance Authority spends most of their time hunting down different versions of Lokis, doesn't it? Like, sure, there are other variants, but the way Mobius described it to the group how they were hunting a Loki variant made it seem like everyone was basically used to these shenanigans. I'm sure they all wake up in the morning, drink their coffee while reading a jet ski magazine, and wonder which type of Loki variant they're hunting that week. And now there's two Loki variants working together and running around, which probably only doubles the hate from the TVA. It doesn't help that the female Loki variant wants to destroy the entire TVA and the Timekeepers, while our Loki is constantly plotting his own plan to take over the TVA. They just require constant supervision. And since they'll probably unravel the entire TVA by the time they're done, thanks to some bombshell reveals about the true nature of the Timekeepers and the Sacred Timeline, I have a feeling that hate will only continue to grow. And yes, I'm calling Loki a hero, even though this is the version of Loki that just tried to invade Earth and plucked out that one dude's eyeball. But it's okay because this Loki is just so charming. Anyone else surprised now that sometime during WandaVision, we didn't get a scene of the TVA sitting around a conference table, quietly stewing in fear and hatred as they watch the commercial for Nexus antidepressants? Because that's a serious issue right there. The first episode of Loki had the delightful Miss Minutes explain how major a Nexus event was and how much the TVA works to stop those. But you know who's capable in the comics and most definitely in the MCU of creating Nexus events? That's right, Scarlet Witch. No wonder the TVA would hate someone like that. If you were running a zoo and most of the animals were normal, but one special zebra had the ability to explode and wipe out everyone, then yeah, you'd probably keep an eye on that zebra, right? Wanda's all-powerful abilities definitely puts her near the top of the TVA's most hated. In the comics, yeah, the TVA don't think the Fantastic Four are that fantastic. There was one time when Marvel's first family had a pretty direct confrontation with the TVA. While in the Null Time Zone, which in the comics is where the TVA is located, the Fantastic Four are basically cornered by the TVA while they totally trash the place. Mobius tries to make a deal with the Thing and Human Torch to change history so that Ben never becomes the Thing and can stay human. And it's tempting at first, but Ben refuses when he hears how casual Mobius is with changing lives. And in the meantime, Mr. Fantastic uploads a virus into the TVA's mainframe, causing a ton of damage. I mean, if a virus was uploaded at the TVA in the MCU, what would happen? They don't look like they have a great tech department, and all their technology looks like it's from the 70s, so I don't think that would turn out so well, do you? In the comics, the TVA really doesn't like it when you try to alter the timeline, so they weren't too fond of She-Hulk when she tried to warn Hawkeye of his impending death. The result was her being arrested by the TVA and put on trial for trying to change the time stream. The stakes here were pretty high. If she lost her trial, she'd be erased from history. That's crazy. Imagine having that sort of power. But the trial itself was wild. She-Hulk is able to bring in any lawyer from the past, present, or future and brings in Southpaw, who eventually would become New York's most accomplished lawyer. Of course, in the end, She-Hulk was spared because she ended up stopping a villain known as Clockwise, so everything worked out. But it just goes to show the consequences of messing with the timeline. The lesson is, if you know Hawkeye is gonna die, just let him. When She-Hulk was arrested by the TVA, she saw that a former Avenger, the Two-Gun Kid, was being kept in cryostasis because he was a general problem to the timeline. It was said that he was such a hero that the TVA couldn't return him back to his timeline because he would inevitably try to fix things that were broken because of the time travel he did, which wouldn't work out well for anyone. If you don't know Two-Gun Kid, well, you can probably surmise a good amount based on his name. He's one of the fastest gunfighters of all time, and don't even get me started on his lasso skills. And yes, he uses two guns. It'd be weird if he didn't, right? Well, even though he's a solid hero, he didn't make that many friends at the TVA. There are a few different versions of Arno Stark running around, but there's one in particular that the TVA especially hates. The Arno Stark from Earth 8410, also known as Iron Man 2020, which seems outdated at the moment, but remember the character was created in 1984. Ugh, feel old yet? Anyways, Arno in that world is Tony Stark's future first cousin once removed, who inherited Stark Industries. And at the beginning, instead of using the Iron Man armor for normal heroics, he instead acted as a mercenary and loved to commit corporate espionage. Arno was seen in confinement at the TVA when She-Hulk was arrested. It's unclear why Arno was picked up by the TVA and in their custody, but given Arno's history with time, as well as how he toes the line between good and evil, it makes sense why the TVA would want to keep an eye on him. Alright, I know Kang is a big villain and could possibly even be the next huge MCU threat, but there are a lot of instances where his actions are really just an attempt to destroy the TVA, who we've learned by now isn't necessarily the best organization. Yes, protecting the timeline is important and all, but they seem to not care about life all that much, which is a little problematic. But overall, everything Kang does usually results in the TVA putting up his picture in their employee lounge so that they could throw darts at his face. Besides just generally wreaking havoc on a bunch of different timelines, something the TVA would have to have a very active involvement in, Kang's tried to destroy the entire TVA more than once. And perhaps most hilariously, he created the Council of Kangs, which is a group of Kangs led by Prime Kang for nefarious purposes. But one funny thing to note is that the Council of Kangs should not be confused with the Council of Cross-Time Kangs, who were a group of aliens who all took up the guise of Kang after killing alternate versions of Nathaniel Richards. Yeah, definitely don't get those confused. Want to hear something fascinating? The TVA actually were first introduced in a Thor comic, Thor number 372 to be exact. In that issue, Thor teams up with a TVA agent named Justice Peace to stop a time-traveling threat, and although it's a fun issue, there wasn't much backstory given. Throughout the years, the TVA has had an interesting relationship with the God of Thunder, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. There is such a group as the Time Twisters, who are the dark, evil versions of the Timekeepers, who once secretly took over the TVA by replacing the Timekeepers. And these Time Twisters have a major enemy in Thor, who's battled the foes on a few occasions. In the Loki TV show, it's shown that the TVA isn't above recruiting some outside help in order to accomplish their missions. Mobius pushed hard to recruit our Loki to stop another variant Loki. And this type of thing happens in the comics too, with the strangest recruitment having to be Deadpool. Basically, the setup is Cable developed a sort of temporal cancer, and Deadpool is tasked by the TVA to kill each version of Cable across all the timelines in an attempt to stabilize the time stream. Of course, Deadpool could never quite follow orders that well, as every temporal plane he visited, he ended up compulsively saving Cable's life rather than killing him, which I'm sure the TVA had a field day with. Of course, it turned out that his actions actually helped save the timeline without killing Cable, and it proved that Deadpool's methods are unorthodox, but there's usually always a better way of doing things. It also showed just how limited the TVA's way of thinking really was. You think the TVA has weekly board meetings where they put up pictures of all the heroes on Earth and are like, alright folks, who do we hate this week? Sorta seems like it, doesn't it? I'm surprised Ant-Man never made the list.